Welcome to the WANA webinar series. As you will notice, all participants have been muted. If you have a question to ask, please send your question into the Q&A panel located at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, or by pressing the three-dot option along the bottom and selecting the Q&A panel. Your questions will be answered after today's presentation. If you have any technical issues, please send a private chat to the host, the directions of which you can find in the chat window. Thank you again for joining, and please welcome Joel Corcoran, Executive Director of Clubhouse International.
Good morning. Thank you, Jessica. I'm pleased to be here. As Jessica said, I'm Joel Corcoran, and I am the Executive Director of Clubhouse International. Very pleased to be here with a wonderful panel today to talk about members on the board of directors of a clubhouse. As I begin, I want to say right up front, we will probably say board or board of directors several times today, but we're talking about clubhouse boards. So we mean board of directors for a freestanding clubhouse or advisory boards for a clubhouse that is part of a parent organization. So know that we're talking about both when we reference board all day today. We're very excited about this topic. We think it's a topic that always gets a lot of attention in clubhouse circles, whether it's at the clubhouse itself or at conferences and seminars or working group meetings. And so we're thrilled to be bringing it to a webinar today so that we can hear the viewpoints of some clubhouse folks and hear your questions and answers about it and see if we can sort of push the topic along in the clubhouse world. So today, let me start by introducing our panel to you. I'm very excited about this panel because I know all of these folks and I know their long-standing commitment and hard work on behalf of their clubhouses, but also with Clubhouse International. So first, we have Knut Stubben, who's from Fontenehuset, Hønefoss in Hønefoss, Norway, where he is a board member, and he's also on the Clubhouse International Board of Directors. Next, we have Donnamarie Randolph, who is from Magnolia Clubhouse in Cleveland, Ohio. Donnamarie is a board member, and she's on the Clubhouse International Accreditation faculty, as is Knut Stubben, I should have said. Next is Andy Wilson from Carriage House in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Andy is the executive director there. He is a member of the Clubhouse International faculty. Following him, Bob Walker from Hillsgrove House in Warwick, Rhode Island, a member of the board and also a faculty member for Clubhouse International. And last but certainly not least, Fred Carpenter from Gateway in Greenville, South Carolina. He is a longtime board member there, a past chair of the board there, and he is on the board of directors of Clubhouse International. So that's our panel today, and they all have strong opinions and are anxious to talk about those with you today. Let me say a few things about members on the board as we get started. You know, I have my opinion about members on Clubhouse boards is that it is a very good idea. It is not a Clubhouse standard. There's no standard that requires that a Clubhouse member be on the board of directors, be included in the board of directors. That subject has not yet reached consensus in the worldwide Clubhouse community. So we do not have language that requires clubhouses to have a member on their board. Most clubhouses do include members on their board, but not all. I think it's a good idea for clubhouses to have members on their board for several reasons, and I think they're pretty straightforward. First and foremost, that a clubhouse member that volunteers to be part of the board of a clubhouse is someone who clearly is, because they come to the clubhouse because they want to be on the board and help. There's someone who has a strong commitment to the clubhouse and to the success of the clubhouse, and I think that perspective is important. To have someone who's a member on the board also adds value to the clubhouse because you get the perspective of someone with the lived experience of mental illness, which I think when making decisions about the future and solving problems and addressing issues and creating innovations at a clubhouse is a very important perspective to have included with the other people who are on the board to help drive it forward. It's also valuable to have a person on the board with a perspective of clubhouse membership, which is different than the perspective of someone living with a mental illness who's not a Clubhouse member, someone who's actually taking advantage of the opportunities that a Clubhouse community provides, and also experiences the strengths, the weaknesses, the needs, the successes of a Clubhouse from the perspective of an active member. In my opinion, is an important voice to have at the board level decision-making table at a Clubhouse, particularly when you're problem solving or planning for the future. And then finally, maybe one of the most important reasons to have people from the membership on the board of directors or board is that there is a lot of talent and skills and wisdom amongst Clubhouse membership. And it's a pool of people who, as I said before, are committed to the success of the Clubhouse and have a vested interest in the success of the Clubhouse. So drawing on that talent pool, to me, just makes sense for the Clubhouse. When we're talking about members who serve on the board of directors, another question that comes up pretty frequently, and we'll talk about today, is how members are selected for the board of directors. In my opinion, members should be elected just like any other board members. I think that board leadership and the Clubhouse director should identify someone from the Clubhouse community who is a good fit for the board. Just like if you were looking for a lawyer for your board, or a real estate person, or a business person, or a politician, you would select someone from that pool of people that makes the most sense, that has something to give to the Clubhouse board, but also is in a good position to serve on the board, that you know and you trust. And I think that that Clubhouse members should be selected exactly the same way. And then, what I don't think is a good idea is practices like, an election amongst all the members. It's more of a popularity contest than a selection sometimes of who's the best person for the board. I don't think there should be, I don't think someone should be asked to go onto the board to represent all members or all people with mental illness, just like a lawyer wouldn't be asked to represent all lawyers. Or their law firm on the board, or just like a politician wouldn't be asked to represent all politicians. So I think that people should be selected because they're the right person. Once a member is on the board, as far as I'm concerned, a member should have all the same responsibilities and rights as any other board member. There should be no differentiation between the expectations and the opportunities and the responsibilities that any board member has, including a member. So same terms of office, same voting rights, same opportunity to address important issues as any other board member. I think that representation on the board without the same influence that other people has is really just tokenism. So that members should be treated exactly the same way. There should be the same attendance and participation in committees expectations that any other board member has. The one area there might be a little bit of a difference is if your your board is a fundraising board, and there is expectations for board members, minimum financial contribution levels, then I think that should be that could be different for the Clubhouse member, but that should be individualized. The member should talk with board leadership about that, and because oftentimes members are not in the same income category in a position to give like some other people, that I believe that that there may be a little bit difference there. There could be a variance in that policy. And then finally, before I ask these same topics to our panel, I want to say that I think that there's an extra responsibility, however, for the Clubhouse director and the board chair when it comes to members coming onto the board. I think that because sometimes there's less experience in that area, not always, but sometimes, and sometimes it's the rest of the board is sort of new at thinking about a member on the board. I think it's important that the Clubhouse director and the board chair make sure, as with any other board member, that the member has all the information they need and is encouraged to participate and is assisted in understanding the way the board works when they first come on, so that they can participate as any other board member. And what I think there's really value added there for the clubhouse director, because the clubhouse director also experiences the clubhouse in a different way than other board members. But the member on the board and the clubhouse director can work together to make sure that the clubhouse voice in terms of needs and interest and ideas is heard at the board level. And so I think there's a little extra responsibility for communication, particularly from the clubhouse director with the member who's on the board. So those are some out of the box opinions from me about members on the board. But let me turn now to our panel. And we agreed on an order that I was going to ask these questions the other day, but I just wrote down some notes and I'm not sure I copied the same order. So forgive me if I get this wrong. But let me start with this question. What would you say a little bit about your experience with your board and member participation and why it's important at your clubhouse? And I'm going to start with Knut Stubben.
Yes, Joel. I have had a seat in an independent clubhouse board, a national coalition board, and still I have a seat in Clubhouse International board of directors. To sit in a board is a great opportunity for members who want to challenge themselves, to develop themselves, and to see the clubhouse from other perspectives. The member is in the board. The member is also valued by the presence of itself. I can put it that way: by only be in the board as a member, you will remind the other board members about what this is about, just to be there. And so, as you pointed out, Joel, it's very important that the member in the board have the experience of the clubhouse with him into the board, and a guide can advise the other board members in this. So there's a lot of perspectives here. It's a possibility for the members. This is my experience. A possibility as a member to develop also out of the clubhouse and into a board, and also into a coalition board, and also into Clubhouse International's board. I think this, for me, this has been a ladder, so to speak, for myself. So I have developed throughout being a board member. So this has been a great opportunity for me. And an example, I will give you an example of how a member can be can help out the board to get in the right direction. When my clubhouse was fairly new, the chair of the board asked the clubhouse about the possibility to produce items to sell to finance the clubhouse operation. Then at the board meeting, I had to tell the board then about the standards and how the standards work, and I think it's standard 16 or something that tells that you cannot do that. So I had to teach the board about the standards and what a clubhouse is and how a clubhouse operates. And later on, the chair of the board, he was kind of frustrated about when I told him about all this limitation then in the clubhouse board. So he asked me what to do. So I told him that we could at every board meeting start with the standard 50 minutes to discuss a standard. And I did that when I was in the board, and that helped a lot for the board to understand. We have developed that to have meetings, the clubhouse and the board together once a year and so on. So this has developed into something good for the board. So I think I'll stop there, Joe.
Thank you, Knut. Appreciate that. Donnamarie, in your experience with your board and member participation, and why you think it's important?
Well, becoming a part of Magnolia Clubhouse's board was initially intimidating. I wasn't even sure if I would be able to fulfill these lofty aspirations of what a board member was, but actually the board was explained to me. Like you said, my director, Lori, took time and talked to me, explained to me the expectations, what could be done. And I found out that I was able to participate just like any other community member of the board. And I was that voice of reason from the member perspective, because oftentimes, with the best intentions, the board members came in, but they were intentionally or unintentionally looking to create something that was familiar to them in their workspace. And it was that voice of reason that I would say, whoa, that sounds really good in corp world, but this is a Clubhouse community and this is how things go. So like can you say educating about the standards and things like that was really important to help keeping the board within the philosophy of Clubhouse. So I think my experience for me was validating, and it helped. I also was able to go back and tell members what was going on, because at the end of the day, we all know those board meetings happen behind the closed doors and members are like, oh, it's a closed door, the secret world of board. And I could come out and say, no, this is just real regular people having real regular conversations to help make our Clubhouse better. So that was my experience. And I have actually just returned to the board after stepping back for a few years, and I'm a part of the executive board now. And once again, the ability to speak to the board as an active member and let them hear what members are needing and what members want is, to me, is very fulfilling. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Donnamarie. Appreciate that. Andy, how about from the perspective of a Clubhouse executive director?
Well, Joel, I won't speak on behalf of all executives of Clubhouse programs, but let me. So I come to this topic oddly. So my first executive director was a guy named Bob Harvey, was a protege of the Clubhouse model very, very early. And he used to say, "Never will I ever have a member on my board of directors." And it was because he had a fundraising board, and he said $5,000. If you don't give $5,000 to the Clubhouse every year, you can't be on the board. And he would say, it is the worst kind of tokenism if we say that we will make an exception for a member of the Clubhouse. That would be tokenism. I've come to believe he was just wrong, and he's just wrong. He was using his board in the wrong kind of way. It has seemed to me that Clubhouse boards are the strongest when they have family members for passion, when they have members for the perspectives that Joel was talking about, when we have a whole bunch of other people to help us raise a truckload of money. So from the perspective of the Carriage House, we're simply better. We've got four members of the Carriage House who sit on our board. One's a founding member, one's an appointee from somebody else. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but the Carriage House is odd in the sense that when we were founded and 3 different agencies get appointments to our board of directors. So I've got a local community mental health center that gets to appoint 3 people to our board. We've got the local NAMI group gets to appoint 3 people to our board, and the Carriage House gets to appoint 3 people to our board as per our bylaws. So it functions a little differently. That we've got a very large board. We've got a board of, I think it's 26 seats right now, but the appointments there are odd. The only other thing that I would say up front is Joel talking about the relationship between the director and a member on the board being a way to help communicate stuff. In the history of the Carriage House, there have been exactly 2 votes that were not unanimous. And it was both because a member of the Carriage House didn't like it, and as Donnamarie was saying, had a unique perspective and didn't like the way that thing was going. So it has been profoundly helpful. I can't imagine having a board without that sort of makeup.
Thank you, Andy. And Bob, how about your perspective from Hillsgrove House in Rhode Island?
Yeah, for one thing, somebody else would have to be the secretary if I wasn't on the board, and I'm not sure they'd be happy with that. But I do the secretarial duties and type up the notes and all. Also, I'm required to be on a committee, which Hillsgrove House is considered a committee by my auspice agency. So I'm on the board of the auspice agency as well, the agency that funds us as Hillsgrove House. And it was an easy ask for me to be serving on Hillsgrove House. I believe in the system. I believe in Clubhouse International. And Rhode Island is, you probably recall, Joel, having lived here, is a bit parochial in terms of fundings and such, and sometimes it's quite uphill to get funding. So I am a Clubhouse member, identified as such on the Thrive website as a member of the Auspice Agency Board, and I can bring that reality of successes of Clubhouse to the board, which frankly, with some of the heavy hitters on the board, those who are fundraisers and such at the Auspice Agency, it becomes real and it becomes a communications tool. We have politicians on the Auspice Agency board, and it's a give and take, and I'm glad to be giving in this case. At one time I asked my director, because I'm sometimes the explainer in chief on the this board. I'm actually in the boardroom for the Hillsgrove House, and I'm busy taking notes. I'm getting questions from a member's perspective, and at that point we had one member on the board. It was me, the only Clubhouse member. And I said, Mark, you've got to get somebody else on. I can't do this alone. And I got a twofer. He put two more people, members on the board. And I hope that helps the people out here understand a little bit about the dynamics.
Bob, thank you for that. I just want to have a clarification, make sure I understand it right. In addition to serving on the Clubhouse board, you represent the Clubhouse on the parent agency board. Is that right? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah. Currently, I'm the only one who represents Clubhouse on the parent agency board. At one point, we had three, but due to health reasons and passing, I'm the only one. I'm sort of working it, try to get somebody else up there. But we'll see. There's always attrition and new members coming onto any board. Anybody who's been on a board will know that.
That's great, Bob. That's an important role. Let me switch to Fred Carpenter from the perspective of someone who's been the board chair and also served on the board for a long time.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, my experience in this area goes back better than 2 decades as far as a board member at Gateway House. I served as chair about 15 years ago for 2 years, and then I served as chair for 6 years. I've also been on the Clubhouse International Board for about 11 years. This is an issue that Joel and I have had a great deal of conversation about over the many years that I've been involved in Clubhouse. And as an international training base and one of the larger clubhouses in our global clubhouse movement, Gateway House has probably not led in this area. In fact, I think it's been somewhat of a controversy, although I personally believe that it's something that we need to pursue. One of the other people that commented on their bylaws that talked about the construct of their board and appointees from various places. And I think that's a really interesting perspective, because you can have a board that hears Clubhouse International's feelings about having a board member, having a member on the board of directors year in and year it without something that kind of makes that happen, it probably won't ever happen. So that's something I'm going to take away from this webinar. I think Clubhouse members have a terrific perspective to bring to the board. We have experimented with this, and we have had Clubhouse members on the board in the past, but probably not in the last decade. The last one who was on our board is still a very active member of Clubhouse. He was formerly a school principal, and he told me honestly, he said, I don't feel like I'm bringing any value to the board. There's not any work that I'm accomplishing, and to this day, I own that, because I think it's very important that the chair the chair and the executive director are closely aligned in shepherding someone who is a Clubhouse member onto the board, and also interacting with them in a special way that's a little bit different than the bankers and lawyers and architects and whatever else occupations are represented on the board. So I think this is something that I want to take a renewed interest in. I'm the old guy on our board. I've been around a long time, but I think it's something that with our current chairman, we're open to do, and I think this webinar is going to help me to kind of revisit that idea. I told Joel the other day, I think all this in a nutshell comes down to the fact that, and this term has already been used this morning, this tokenism is about the worst thing that we can do to a member and to all members, for it to be very apparent that there's someone that is a Clubhouse member that serves on the board that is there just so we can say that we have a Clubhouse member, or that we have 2 African-American women, or 1 African-American man, or 2 Latinos, or anything related to diversity. Tokenism is not a good thing. And so I think it needs to be somebody that can bring talent to the board and can be shepherded and challenged as any other board member would be.
Thank you, Fred. I appreciate that. You know, I was having this conversation with Robbie the other day, and we were talking about some of the history of our decisions to not have members on the board in the earlier days of Clubhouse expansion, with Rudyard and Bob Harvey and Jim Schmidt and folks who had been involved as executive directors early on. And one of the perspectives was that in those days, you know, which was a number of years back now, it wasn't common at all for people who were service recipients, users of the service, to have a voice in the program at all. So it was not thought of at all to have them on the board of directors. And there was an effort on the part of new executive directors to gain credibility for the Clubhouse as an important organization in the community. And so they only wanted influential community members or wealthy people who could be philanthropic on their board. But as times have changed, it's much more common to have the voice of someone with the lived experience of mental illness involved in all kinds of decisions. And so that's changed a little bit over time. But let me go on to the next point so we can keep this moving along and have time for some questions and answers. I'm going to ask the panel, would you agree with me what I said about when a member is elected to the board, that their role is the same as anybody else's on the board? Let me start with Donnamarie on that one.
I'm going to definitely say yes, but as you spoke up earlier, keeping in mind that people's financial situation can be different based on the they may not be employed, but they still can bring value. Having a conversation with the board president or the executive board and the director with the understanding that I want to contribute, but I may not be able to give that $5,000 or $10,000, Andy. I may only be able to give 500. And at the end of the day, my voice still has value. And while the community members have that higher bar, I don't think because I am a participant or a member of the board, that should stop me from being a part of the board. And if that's the case, I guess I should get my little quarter book together and raise my $5,000. But what I'm bringing to the table is intrinsic and it doesn't really have a dollar value like the other community board members. So I feel that I'm just going to say yes. Everything that a regular board member does, a member of the clubhouse should be able to do.
Knut, what's your perspective on that?
Absolutely, Joel. The member's role in the board is the same as any other board member. This because the member's responsibility in the board is not only to be there as a representative for the members, but to bring the members' perspective onto the board. So I think I stop there.
Thank you, Knut. So, Andy, Bob, or Fred, do any of you have a different opinion or something you'd like to add to that part of the conversation? Andy? Andy, I think you're muted.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I don't have a different opinion. I just wanted to add something to what I think that Fred was getting at as well. It seems to me that a thing about boards always is there has to be work to do. Board members don't like to be bored, and that is true of lawyers and doctors and true of members on the board. So the work, I think, is the same, and it's contingent on those of us in leadership in boards to make sure that there actually is work to be involved in.
Thanks, Andy. Oh, sorry, Andy.
The peer aspect of members who are on advisory boards or boards will be able to explain things to other members. We affirm to other members that there is a value to our work, hopefully, and that we count as members. And I will get questions. They should know me by now. They should feel comfortable asking me, and I'm glad to answer.
Thanks, Bob. Fred, did you want to add anything to that one?
Yeah, just very quickly. I would say when it comes to, I currently chair the nominating committee, so this is something that's close to my heart. The very first threshold that I like to cross when we're looking for new board members is passion and excitement and appreciation for the work that we do in Clubhouse, in the Clubhouse movement all over the world. And so I can think of nothing more important than the camaraderie that is built on the board about passion and about feeling good about the work that we're doing. And I think that whether it's some socials that we have, the regular board meetings, the Christmas party, the board Christmas party, that is, not the Christmas dance, having folks that are Clubhouse members be a part of that should absolutely be a main ingredient for them to be able to share that passion and grow the camaraderie that the board has with each other.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you all for your comments on that one. So I want to move on to the next question then. I'm going to throw you all a little twist on this one because I didn't mention this before, but it occurs to me now. So I want to talk with you about how members should be selected for the board. You know, I talked a little bit about my opinions about the selection process being the same as any other board members, but there are clubhouses that have consensus building meetings where they decide who's going to be at. Some clubhouses over in the years past have had votes for that. But here's the twist. How can we communicate it to Clubhouse members? Or what's the best way to recruit interest from membership on the board, to be on the board? How do we, when you're thinking about how you select people for the board, how can we encourage, how can clubhouses sort of encourage members to think about that as an opportunity? So Fred, can I just start with you? We'll go backwards this time.
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking about how that process might go. And I think that one of the things that people who are at the clubhouse every day, especially the executive director, but also senior and rank and file staff, have the very best knowledge of the individual members, whereas board members, especially newer board members, may not have ever been to the clubhouse during the day, and so really don't have a lot of personal knowledge about people. about individual members of the clubhouse. We do encourage that as they serve on the board, that they come by the clubhouse periodically, monthly, weekly, whatever, for a cup of coffee and some fellowship in the break room. But I think that it can be so important for the people that are potentially members who become board members to be well known. And so my thinking, as somebody else was talking about this, was maybe a good idea about the selection process would be that we have 22 professional staff at Gateway House, that we actually say to the staff, how about nominating, give us a name, give us 3 names, whatever, of members that you think could really bring something to the board of directors. And that way it's not an election per se, but at least it says that the majority of the staff thinks that William Omert or some other member of the clubhouse would really bring something to the board of directors.
Thank you, Fred. What are your thoughts on that one, Bob?
Well, neatly tying into regular clubhouse activities is the desire to do it, obviously. A certain amount of cajoling can happen, which happens all the time in the work order day. Also, that they understand Robert's Rules of Orders a bit, and if you watch the new Hollywood, if you watch different things, you get a little bit of taste of that. But they shouldn't be feel that it's a big hill to climb, but that they are willing to buckle down and listen, because most of the time on the board, unless you're the chair or presenting, you're going to be doing a lot of listening, which is an important quality.
Thanks, Bob. I said that I thought the director had a significant role in helping to identify people in the clubhouse. Andy, what are your thoughts about all this and my comments about the director's role?
Oh, heck. So I think our first thing is our board meetings are open. So we say to anybody who wants to attend the board meetings or wants to be on the board, please come. Please come and sit. And then I think what
Oh, we lost your audio.
Yeah, I'm having trouble with my connection. I apologize. Also, understanding the Roberts rules is really important. And I think that maybe after people attend a couple of times, it's not for everybody. And I think that maybe there's some impression within the clubhouse that, this is the place where real decisions are made. And after a couple of meetings realize, well, no, the real decisions are actually made in the policy meeting. This is a group of people that helps us structurally and culturally rather than making clubhouse decisions. So I think that experience, after people have that experience, I think lots of folks self-select because frankly, they're just most of the clubhouse community, in my estimation, doesn't really want to sit on a board and come to long, boring meetings. Most people actually want to come and help make some killer lunch tomorrow. So, and then I think for us, we'll get a short list of people that are interested, and then it will be through myself and the leadership of our board, including a member of the clubhouse is on that leadership of our board. We'll make the decision on what we think the most appropriate, beneficial ask will be to join us.
So, Andy, there's some interesting things we learned a little bit about Carriage House there. Let me get a little bit of clarification for you. First, now Bob mentioned it, you mentioned it. So for people who don't know what Robert's rules are, would you say a couple of sentences about that?
Sure. It's just for those who don't know, it's pretty silly. It's the thing that says you have to make a motion and you have to have a second to the motion. There's certain ways that you have to talk. If you're not on the agenda, you're not allowed to talk. You got to get approval for all sorts of things. It doesn't have to be ugly, but it is a pretty strong way to make sure that that order is kept in that meeting. So it looks very different than a clubhouse meeting. And that is, I think, unusual culturally to lots of us.
Yeah, it's a generally accepted formal process for rules of order for operating a board. And I think that you can look that up online and find that if you don't, Robert's Rules of Order, if you're not familiar with it. You also, Andy, were talking about coming and participating and see if it's a good fit. Now, as I understand it at Carriage House, you have elected members of the board, but the board meetings are open. So when you say come to the board meeting, you mean come and watch, but people don't have a voice to vote or those kind of things that they're watching.
Exactly. I apologize. So at our board meetings, those members those board members who are voting members have a name tag and a seat around a big board table. And then there's a bunch of chairs on the outside in the peanut gallery where anybody can be part of the meeting. However, if you're not on the agenda, you do not get a speaking role and you never get a vote unless you are part of the board.
And then finally, you distinguished between the board meeting decisions and topics and the policy meeting decisions and topics, where you said much more interesting and important decisions. The policy meeting is not a board committee. That is your clubhouse, the house policy meeting, correct?
Absolutely. I seem to be the least organized speaker out there. I apologize for all of those undefined things. Yes, policy meeting is a clubhouse meeting that we have inside the clubhouse.
Thanks, Andy. That's a good look at how things are done at Carriage House. Appreciate that. So, Donnamarie, your thoughts on selection on the board and how to get that information out to members about the opportunity of being on the board.
I think it should be an open topic of discussion. If a person is in a house meeting, things are related that happen to during the board meeting. You can do it in the morning meeting or in the afternoon meeting, discuss things that are related to that unit or that department. I don't know what you guys call it, and say it. But for me, I was a strange bird. I actively inquired, hey, I want to be a part of that because I need to understand this better. And actually, I kind of find Roger's Rules a very common way to get through those long meetings because there is a known structure and you know what to expect. So for me, I was the unusual bear. I sought it out and went with it. But there are other members that had good fits, and so they were asked, "Hey, would you like to be a part of this? And this is what you could do." So that's I think having an open conversation and not making it a secret. So there's the opportunities for it to be spoken of during house meetings and morning or afternoon meetings. Now people are aware and they can make an informed decision.
Thank you, Donnamarie. That's great. It's really an interesting point. I think for Clubhouse members who are listening to this webinar, Donnamarie's experience is instructive there. If you have an interest, if you're interested in participating that way, bring it up. Bring it up with your director at your house meeting or wherever you think it might be the right place to do it at your clubhouse. But one way to get involved is to express your interest. So I'm happy to hear that. Knut, your thoughts on member selection and how we can encourage members to think about this as an opportunity.
Yes, my view is that a clubhouse member should be nominated by the clubhouse and appointed by the board. This means that the member is personally responsible for its seats, like all the other board members that we are talking about before. But the clubhouse should have a written procedure that explains the role and the responsibility of a board member to be a board member. Also a list, that's what I mean, of a qualification a member candidate must have. Here I will suggest that at least to have been at Clubhouse training, for example, at a Clubhouse International Training Base. I think it's very important that the Clubhouse member has some knowledge about the model and is a kind of experienced member before coming in. Else, I just think the other participant here had covered what I also mean. So,
That's interesting, though. You think that there should be a written description of the responsibilities of a board member, or specifically for a member board member?
No, I think it's a kind of both.
And you think that should be distributed amongst the membership so that they know what that responsibility is? That's what you're saying. I think that's an interesting
Yes.
project maybe.
I can put it that way, Joel. At my example, at my clubhouse, we put up a list on the board with explanation what the role of a board member is. And if you are interested in be elected or nominated to the board, then you put your name on them. And then we have an election at the clubhouse among the members. So we have a procedure before it, and then the board elects this nominee. So it's nothing but because so we have a procedure in forehand, so we have a good time. I think 4 weeks, at least 4 weeks, to discuss and work with this to explain the role and things like that. So everyone is secure before they are putting the name on the list. Yeah.
Thank you, Knut. Okay, let's move on to the last prearranged question here and talk about supporting a member who comes onto the board. Are there any particular things that you can think of or that your clubhouse does to help make sure that the experience of the member coming onto the board is valuable, and how does that differ from other people who come on as members of the board? Let me start. I'll switch it up a little bit again. Let me start with Andy this time. Go right to the middle of my list.
I don't know that we have a special sort of way to be more helpful to members on our board than we do other board members. I think it is a little different. The relationship is definitely pretty different because I see members of the Carriage House a lot, but probably every day in the clubhouse. So we are tighter and closer and communicate rather a lot more than the other people who sit on our board. But we don't have a specific structure within the board for doing that.
What about your role? How do you help a member who comes on the board?
It's the same kind of you'll forgive the jingo onboarding process, learning about the financials and how to read the audit and how to do all that sort of business. And then I think it's just a matter of explaining roles and being clear on how this thing works. I honestly wouldn't say that it's substantially different than other board members.
And as a director, do you prep for board meetings differently with the clubhouse member than you would with other board members?
No, almost always the members who sit on the board are at the clubhouse and they say what's on the agenda before I email it out to the rest of the board. So we get a chance to talk about it, but it's not part of the structure.
Okay, thank you. Bob, how about you? What are your thoughts on how the clubhouse and the director can be supportive of members coming onto board or the rest of the board?
Okay, and having worked with Andy, I know his style, and he will have that member needed, wanted, and expected in classic clubhouse tradition. And that's important. That's important that the member feel appreciated and understands that the work itself is important. Beyond that, anybody, or typically if a person is joining an advisory board or board of directors, they will be chomping at the bit to do something, to make a difference. And there needs to be support built around that. And it's no different for members than from anybody else on a board. And I realize we're running out of time. There we go.
But thanks, Bob. I appreciate that. How about you, Fred? Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, I'm not now. I said earlier, I think it's very important if we're going to have a member of the clubhouse to be on the board of directors, that there be somewhat of a more intensive involvement with that individual between the executive director and the member and between the chair and the director. I think one of the things that I heard from the last member that we had serve on the board was that he didn't feel that he had really been brought into the board in any way other than as a token. He didn't really, it was not given any particular responsibilities. And again, that's on me. But I think going forward in this, I would make sure that there was a really good, steady link between the member and the chair and the executive director.
Thanks, Fred. Knut or Donnamarie, did you want to add anything to this? If you do, great. If not, maybe we'll move to the question and answer section.
Yes, Joe, I have something, and that's just to be quick and fast here. I think it's important to a kind of debriefing when you have a new member at the board. So then the director or the chair of the board should go through the meeting afterwards and ask if there is anything you want to talk and maybe adjust. Just a kind of debriefing. I think that's important.
Thanks, Knut. Donnamarie, did you want to add anything? Okay, so Jessica, I think we're ready for some questions and answers, if we have any.
Excellent, thank you. For those that have a question they would like to ask, please submit your questions in the Q&A panel located in the bottom right-hand side of your screen, or by pressing the three-dot option along the bottom and selecting the Q&A panel. I'd like to first read some wonderful feedback that we received from Ian Watkins. He said, I am the board president of Independent Center in St. Louis. This is an excellent conversation. I have directly experienced the benefit of having members participate on the board. The comments about consistently aligning back to the Clubhouse standards has been an area of focus for us over the past 12 months. We have expanded the number of members sitting on the board from 2 to 4. Thank you, Ian, for your feedback.
Thanks, Ian.
Your first question is, some clubhouses have a system of rotation of members on the board that is different from the terms of other board members. Is that a good system to give many members the opportunity?
So I have a strong opinion of that, but let me open it up to the panel first. Does somebody want to comment on that?
I don't think that's healthy because a board member from the community needs a certain amount of time to acclimate to being on the board. And you're not giving the member the same opportunity to acclimate to being on the board so that they can give their best and fulfill their role in the board. It's kind of like a puppy mill if you're constantly rotating somebody in and out, and it almost goes to what Fred was saying. It's a token. Oh, I've got a board, I've got a member. Let that member come in and get an opportunity to learn the people on the board, understand really what the vision is, maybe be a part of the strategic planning. It takes more than a year, and that's why our terms are longer than a year.
Thanks, Donnamarie. Anybody else want to comment on that? Well, you know, I go ahead. Who is it?
I think for smaller clubhouses, that could be a real problem too, in that not everybody wants to be on an advisory board. You could exhaust your possible membership pretty quickly, in my opinion.
Thanks, Bob. You know, I tend to agree with Donnamarie on that one. I think that that being elected to the board, you have the same rights, responsibilities, and terms as anyone else. Most organizations will have terms anywhere from 1 to 2 or 3 years on the board, and people are reelected based on a discussion individually about whether it still makes sense for them to be on the board, whether they still have something to contribute or time and interest. And I think it's a mistake to just let some policy about moving somebody off reflect that decision. I think we want people on our boards of directors who are in a position to contribute, who are doing well at it. So even if a member isn't able to participate or isn't able to contribute for some reason or the other, I think that's a discussion you have with that member, just like you would with every other board member. There are some people who are great that for whatever reason, things going on in their lives, they may not be able to participate in a way that's helpful to the clubhouse at that time. And then I think you have that conversation about going off and making room for somebody who is in a position to help and contribute at that time. But if somebody is contributing and they're valuable and they're active and they're involved on the board, I would not want that person to have to rotate off just because of a policy that says you only get 1 year. And I think Donnamarie is absolutely right. Even some of our most talented board members do not hit their stride until they're on the board for 2 or 3 years sometimes, when they get to know the clubhouse and the needs and the interest. So I would not have that kind of a policy. That's my opinion.
Hey,
I
Joe,
agree.
can I say something real quick?
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Andy, then Fred.
Okay, I agree completely with Donnamarie and you. It just seems to me, for what it's worth, a way to get people involved is committee work of the board. Lots of times, a committee of the board does not have to comprise board members or all board members. So members who are interested in other community members can get involved in real board work through committee structures.
That's a really strong point, Andy. Thank you. Fred?
I think, Joel, you know this, that although we have defined terms, what we did change in the bylaws some years ago was reference to how many terms someone can serve. And we basically have that as an unlimited number of terms. Our feeling when we made that change in the bylaws, whether this is a clubhouse member who's a board member or another board member, we just felt like once you've got somebody on board that's passionate and is doing a great job, and particularly when it's difficult to find great board members, why should you say you need to leave for a couple of years?
Thanks, Fred. Jessica, do we have another question?
You do. Is there a role for staff on the board other than the director?
Let me ask. Let me throw that one to Andy, then Fred first, and then to the other folks on the board, since you guys are have been in the role of director and staff and chair of the board. But anybody can comment on it.
Seems to me no, that by and large best practice across the world in terms of boards, no paid staff of the organization ought to be on the board. The paid staff of the organization at any level work at the pleasure of the board and not on the board.
I couldn't agree more with that, Andy. Having any board of directors, whether it's a nonprofit or a corporate board, as a general rule, only the CEO reports to the board and is accountable to the board and can be hired and fired by the board. So I would say an absolute no to that.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Bob?
Just remember, from time to time, you'll have staff presenting to the board, which is not board membership at all, but for those less familiar with boards, that's another way they can approach the board.
Thanks, Bob. Donnamarie, did you want to say something?
I concur with what was said.
And Knut, I can't see you, so I don't know if you're trying to get in or not.
Yes, I have a comment there. I think it's depends on where you're living in the world, because in Norway, staff has a right to be on the board if the number of staff is over a certain limit. I don't remember a number. I think it's 50 or something. Then they are entitled to have a voting seat in the board. So there is some regulation here we had to take into consideration.
So that's a cultural difference, and I think that's important. That you know, when boards operate, they operate within the culture where they're located, and the laws and requirements. I think that's important. Jessica, I think we can handle one more question, if there is one. Otherwise, I have one.
Excellent, thank you. You do have one more question. We do have, what questions should be asked when interviewing a member to be on the board?
Well, Knut, from your experience as being on the board and a member on the board, what do you think?
It's almost an impossible question, you know. It depends on so much, but I think I would kind of ask about the motivation. Why are you doing this? Why do you want to take a seat on the board?
Great, thank you. Andy, was that your hand raised? No. Anybody else want to comment on that question?
Joel, we do have one very interesting situation where we have a board member who was formerly a staff member for over 10 years and left and went into the private sector in a marketing position. And after that length of time, he expressed an interest in serving on our board. So when you're mining for board members, that's often a very good place to look.
Well, terrific. Well, you know, I think this has been a really fascinating conversation. I think we could probably go on for 2 hours, but thank you for those of you who wrote questions in, and Ian for your comments from Independence Center, and a special thank you to each of the panelists. You've been very, very interesting and helpful in this conversation. I think we're right at the hour now. Is that right, Jessica?
Yes, thank you. If you want to go ahead and continue with closing remarks.
Sure. So, you know, I hope that you'll take this conversation back to your clubhouses and talk about the important role that members can play on the board and some of the topics we talked about here. I hope you've learned some things about how to have that conversation at your clubhouse. I know this has been recorded, and so please encourage folks at your clubhouse to listen, or at least bring the topics from this conversation to your clubhouse. We're all stronger when we talk about these things, and we push each other to be better. Thank you all.
Thank you all for joining today. If your question has not been answered, please send an email to wanawebinar@fountainhouse.org. The recording will be made available next week. There will also be a survey on screen once the event ends today. Please take a moment and fill it out to give us your feedback. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Please be on the lookout for announcements regarding future webinars. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
It's been great, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.